Hi, I'm Nikki. I am with Boost Midwest. I'm the marketing specialist, and I'm here with Doug Fiester. Doug is the Chief Client Officer for Laitek. And Doug, would you like to introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about what Laitek does, the size of the company, and then what you do day to day?
Great. Thanks, Nikki, and thanks for having me today. Yes, my name is Doug Fiester. I am the Chief Client Officer for Laitek. Primarily, my responsibilities are for any of the client-facing departments within Laitek. What that includes is marketing, sales, our project management office, and our support services. So my role on a daily basis is making sure that I create and help the team achieve the vision across all of our client-facing departments. And that vision is really providing top-of-the-line software and services to ensure that we achieve the objectives of our clients out in the marketplace. Laitek itself was originally founded in 1980 by medical physicist Fred Balin. Dr. Balin, he's a leading specialist in imaging informatics in the industry. Around 2004, for about the last 18 years, Laitek has created a focus in working with hospitals, imaging centers, and some of our business partners to really focus on their existing clinical imaging needs. Many of that is through services, through migration services, from moving from a PACS to a VNA or moving from PACS to PACS. But we specialize and have some unique abilities in the marketplace to help some of our customers out with their imaging needs. We've also developed a line of software solutions that allow what we call leave behinds. That is, once the migration services are done, we can leave those software packages behind and help them with their imaging. So that has been our focus for about the last 18 years. We continue to grow in that area. Things have been done very well for us, but we've managed to create a little niche in the marketplace and to continue to grow that line of business.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like you guys kind of do it all and then leave behind so that you make sure that your clients are set up for the future, which I think is key and great.
Absolutely. For years, we would do our migration services, then leave, and our clients would call us and say, well, everything you fixed during the services, now they're an issue because you're gone. And so that's where our need came naturally to fill that, to help fill that need in the marketplace came naturally because of our clients' request is, hey, you're gone. We still need help. So the leave behinds were something that we probably in the last 3 or 4 years really started to concentrate on and to help out our customers.
Yeah, that's great. So Laitek recently went under Boost Midwest AIM Operations Workshop, and AIM stands for Analyze, Innovate, and Manage. So if on behalf of Laitek, could you give us an overall, what was your overall experience, how it went, and what your team thought about it as a whole?
Absolutely. Yes. Overall, it was a very positive experience through the AIM process with Boost Midwest. The staff was professional and courteous, and one of the things they really did well was they were very good at getting the information out of our team. And I'll talk a little bit about how that process went. Laitek is, what I didn't mention earlier about Laitek is we actually have 3 offices. Our headquarters is just outside of Chicago. We have an office in Cluj, Romania. And then we have another office, a smaller office in London, England. So we are an international company. That created some complexity because our US and Romania team are the 2 primary ones that work together on a daily basis. So some of the process was a little bit more challenging, not only from time zones, but we had different cultures that we were working through. We have about 75 to 80 specialists worldwide. And on an average, we continue to do about 80 to 100 projects concurrently. Those range from small, few month projects to literally multi-year projects with some of the largest hospitals and institutions in the world. So our coming into the process, we did 2 things primarily. One was the survey that was given to all of the team, and this survey focused on, or this process focused on our project management office only. It is their responsibility is primarily for driving revenue recognition for the organization. That organization makes up about 35 to 40% of the total staff. So everyone received a confidential survey where they answered a number of questions, and then Boost Midwest compiled those for us. The second component of that was an interview process where not all, but many of the team members, the Boost Midwest team, met with and interviewed on an hour session, asking similar questions, but trying to get different views and additional information from the different topics. One of the things I thought was very interesting and I thought was extremely valuable is the findings on some of the surveys would say one thing, like, for example, our communication was great, scored very high that we had good communication. When you did the interviews, we actually found out it wasn't as great as what the surveys listed. So I think there was huge value in that, in approaching this from both angles, is you really got an opportunity to ask the questions. And because sometimes in a survey, people interpret it differently. You might give a different answer. But in that live interview, it gave the ability for your team, the Boost Midwest team, to really dive down and go, is your communication as good as you think it is? And the reality is it wasn't. And it was something that we knew going into this, but this process just reiterated that and gave us some direction of what we needed to do. There's been a lot of pressure in the last few years. We've had record sales, and it's created a lot of pressure on the project management office. Before this time, they were able to just, I hate to say, just get by. The processes we had were fine. The communication was fine. Wasn't the best, but you know what? We did okay. With the growth that we've experienced, we started to see the stress points in our organization, and things weren't working. Things weren't smooth. The balls were getting dropped. A lot of that we had identified through, again, as I mentioned, the communication or some of the standardization in our process, that with Boost Midwest coming in, we were able to get an independent third-party evaluation of that and even dive deeper into the process and help us identify some of those areas where we could fix and where we could improve. So very good, and actually enjoyable. Surprising I can use that word in a process like this, but it was enjoyable working with the team, just because their demeanor and their professionalism, and true help in helping us identify some of our gaps.
That's great. So now you mentioned some of the more pain points of your operations and your project management team overall. So based on that, what would you say some of the actionable steps that you were able to put in place came directly from the workshop? Maybe it was from communication or processes that you were able to put together post-workshop.
Okay. Yes. I mentioned communication already, and to dive a little bit deeper in that, what we determined, it wasn't the lack of quantity, it was the quality of communication. One of the examples is, like any organization, there's too many channels to communicate, whether it's through email, through texting, through Teams, or some other mechanism. There's no standardization. People today, I may hit you, Nikki, with a message in Teams, and tomorrow I'm going to put it in email, and then I'm going to put it in voicemail the next day. So a lot of that was the quality of communication and how we communicated that. And that was one of the surprising things that came out of the survey, where everybody said, oh yeah, we have great communication. But the reality is that we found out there was a lot of gaps. Learning to communicate appropriately was another big area. We do a lot, I'll call it laziness, is where we forward emails. We say, see below, and it requires somebody to read an email chain that's 4 pages long. So it really not effective, and a lot of duplication and a lot of wasted effort trying to communicate and keep up with the various things that were going on in a project. That also led into some of our standardization. Yes, as I've asked the team many times about are we all doing things the same way? The answer is yes. When you pull back the covers, you find out, no, we're not. A recent example of that is our chief technology officer that lives in Romania. Started the company and was one of the original migration people to work on the projects. And I've had many discussions with him because he knows how things work. And I had him sit through a discussion that we had a few months ago, and his eyes were opened how things had grown and how we had deviated over the years. So again, not that we're unique in that, but any organization, as you grow, you're going to diverge, and you're going to find that people are doing things differently. They find shortcuts, they find workarounds. So that was a glaring result that came out of the interviews, is the lack of standardization and really pulling it back and seeing how people had created their own ways. And some of them were good ways, they were good workarounds. But the point is, they were still workarounds. And so that created some disjointedness in the projects themselves. Things were getting missed, and in the communication, back to the communication, it was hard to keep up with that. Another thing that came out was our tooling. We have been an organization that has built our own, I'll call it a ticket list tool rather than a project management tool, but we were able to discover through the interview process, a lot of the deficiencies in our tool. And again, some of the wasted effort and duplication that we were doing. And so that is one of our big efforts today that we're continuing to work on, learning or figuring out how do we create better tools or go to a third-party tool to be able to manage some of this communication in the projects a little bit better. And the last thing is related to the tools that I'd probably mention is the interdepartment coordination. Again, with the lack of good tools and communication, we found that members of the team that were on the same project were not in sync with one another. And another interesting point that came out of the survey was, yes, we're all coordinated, we're in sync, works like a dream. When you got to the interview process, that didn't happen. There was a lot of gaps that the team was able to identify. So again, go back and reemphasize the value of doing both, the in-person interviews as well as the survey, because there were differences. When we brought that back to the team and showed them, I won't say that they were surprised. They said, "You're right." And many of the quotes that we read to the team, they weren't surprised. So it was a good eye opener for the team overall. And but those were some of the big ideas, some of the big things that came out that we are continuing to work on and focusing on.
I think that's great. This time and technology, there are so many assets and facets of way of, channels of talking to one another, that I think it's great that Laitek was able to say, hey, we have all of these different areas of communication and outlets, but we need to slim it down where we're all in sync and we're all communicating the same way and effectively, so that your Romanian team, your London team, and your US team, they're all saying, okay, this is the process and this is how it will be communicated regardless of the time zone, regardless of where you are in the world. So I think that's great that you guys were able to see that immediate transparency through your team. So I think that's amazing. And then you did mention some of the KPIs that you guys have already touched on through the survey, which a KPI is a key performance indicator for those that are curious. And I know you noticed some immediate improvements that need to be made. Are you still seeing those improvements being put into place? And since the workshop, are there new KPIs that you have noticed that say, oh, that's a really good idea, let's implement this here, sort of idea?
Yes, great question. I'd like to say that we've completed and we're all finished with a number of those, but it is definitely a work in progress. And the reality is, I don't know that we'll ever be finished. Since these interviews, I have hired a new director of the project management office, a gentleman by the name of Jesus, has come on and has an extensive background in project management and the clinical imaging world. So he's helping go through this. We still are working on a number of them specifically around communication, because that communication is not just for the PMO team, it is for the organization. Like others, there's too many cool and shiny objects out there where, wow, here's a new way to communicate somebody wants to try. And our target is streamlining that, is use the tools we have. So how do we eliminate some of the avenues? We have gone so far as to shut down our voice over IP phone lines. Nobody used them, but yet somebody would send a message and nobody paid attention. So we begin to close certain lines of communication, forcing everybody to go back through what we've designed and rationale, move from a homegrown file structure system for sharing files into SharePoint. So really utilizing something like Microsoft to using those tools and staying within the confines. So made improvement there. We still have a long ways to go. The standardization and the tools, a lot of what we're finding now is, yes, now we know what to do, but the challenge has been changing human behavior. And that is where we are today, is helping the team understand the benefits and changing that behavior. They've been working this way, some of them for over a decade, and it snuck up on them when they didn't realize it, and the inefficiencies. And so getting them to understand that. And so that's why I say this will be something that we'll be working on for the next 12 months at least, trying to improve. And after that, I don't know that we'll ever be finished, but it is still a lot work in progress and going forward. Definitely making steps. We have identified the problems, and that's the first step, is understanding, okay, what is broken? What do you need to fix? What is not working well? And where can you make improvements? And so that's where we are today around some of those KPIs.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I appreciate the honesty that you guys will continue to move forward from now until whenever, until the end, basically, because I personally believe that's how companies grow and evolve. Like, you always have to be changing how you communicate, how your processes are working. And like you mentioned, if there's too many doors open in terms of communication, like the technology way, then everybody's going to keep scattering, and then you're not going to know which way is the effective way. So having a couple of main doors of communication, whether it's, Teams, or whether it's an email, voicemail, etc., then I think that you eliminate miscommunication, basically,
Absolutely.
So I think that's great. So kind of to wrap it up a little bit, I appreciate your time. What would you tell someone if they were considering having Boost Midwest come in and do an AIM operational workshop with them?
Absolutely. And you hit on a couple of the points. The first thing that I thought was very beneficial is the Boost Midwest team came in, and their first goal was to understand our business. And what is our goal? What are we trying to achieve? Not that you would understand all the day-to-day operations that we do around medical imaging management, but what were we trying to achieve? And what did we consider our issues today? So it really set a baseline. So I would say that is an important piece, to be ready to do that and have your goals and objectives lined out. The second that you just mentioned was honesty. I have an open door policy with my team. I try and be as transparent as possible. Obviously, there's business things that we can't disclose, but for the day-to-day stuff, we try and be as transparent as we can. So go into it with the idea of honesty and making your team feel honest. And my third point will be vulnerability, which ties in with the honesty, is be willing to accept and hear what's not working. Many times when we hear bad news, we suddenly get into justification mode. Well, this is why we do that, or don't do that. Be open, be honest, encourage your team to be honest, and accept the things that are pointed out. I am not a fan, an example is I'm not a fan of annual performance reviews, because I figure by that time it's too late. You should basically have how you're doing every day, and if there's an issue, let's deal with it today, openly and honestly. And that works both ways. If my team has an issue with me, let me know. Let's talk about it. Let's get through it. There may be reasons why things are the way they are. But if it's not working for you, we need to talk about it real time. So that's what I would encourage anybody that goes through this process is be honest, and encourage your team to be honest and be willing to accept the bad news, if you will. I hate to call it bad news, but the bad news, the areas where you can improve, because without that and without accepting that, you'll never move forward. You'll be stuck in your ways and consistently doing what you're doing today. And so really take a step back and be willing to hear that information. Not a threat. It's there to help you grow. And that's the purpose of an exercise like this.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that, by having an everyday meeting that also gives you the opportunity, as you mentioned, having an open door policy, you can be like, hey, that was a great job on that project, or, and then the vice versa, like, hey, I think there are areas that need improvement, but it opens the door to have regular conversation about the good and the not so good. So I think that's a great, just advice for any general in a managerial staff, or whether you're just kind of going about your day-to-day to have that open communication with your teams. And last but not least, are there any companies, and when I say companies, I'm talking size, what they do, their niche in the professional world, that you would recommend take a look at the AIM workshop?
I think that any company, big or small, could take advantage of an assessment such as what we did, whether it's operations or whether it's some other division of the organization. There's always processes. It is, sometimes we get so busy we can't stop and take a look. As I've told Jesus, I'm going to tie a rope around his waist so that I'm able to pull him out of the bog occasionally so he can get the bigger picture. So big companies, small companies, startups, all the way to large companies need something like this to be able to take a step back occasionally and look at their processes, look how they're doing, and evaluate. If everything looks good, you've got an indicator there that you're on the right track. I would question that anybody would find that there is no room for improvement. So this is a perpetual model of self-improvement, is being able to step back and take a look at. So any company that has any organization out there, I think, would benefit from a process such as this.
I love that, because, like the saying goes, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
So if you don't know there's an issue or there's been problems, then you don't know you need to fix it. So, all right. Well, Doug, thank you so much for your time. Happy Friday. And I hope you have a great weekend, and thanks for your time.
All right. Thank you, Nikki.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.